Okay, we continue reading Esperanza Rising. We will start on page 12, another squiggly line. I'm looking a little bit ahead. At this point, I'm not really sure that the squiggly line signifies the passage of time or possibly a different setting. I don't mean like a completely different setting, but maybe Esperanza is now in a different room or, outside or inside. So, something slight has changed in either the time or the place. And so here we are, page 12, squiggly line. Tea was ready in Papa's study, and so was Abuelita. Come, mi nieta, my granddaughter, said Abuelita, holding up yarn and crochet hooks. I am starting a new blanket and will teach you the zigzag. Esperanza's grandmother, whom everyone called Abuelita, lived with them and was a smaller, older, more wrinkled version of Mama. She looked very distinguished, wearing a respectable black dress, the same gold hoops she wore in her ears every day, and her white hair pulled back into a bun at the nape of her neck. But Esperanza loved her more for her capricious ways than for her propriety. Abuelita might host a group of ladies for a formal tea in the afternoon. Then, after they had gone, be found wandering barefoot in the grapes with a book in her hand, quoting poetry to the birds. Although some things were always the same with Abuelita, a lace-edged handkerchief peeking out from beneath the sleeve of her dress, others were surprising. A flower in her hair, a beautiful stone in her pocket, or a philosophical saying salted into every conversation. When Abuelita walked into a room, everyone scrambled to make her comfortable. Even Papa would give up his chair for her. Esperanza complained, "Must we always crochet to take our minds off worry?" She sat next to grandmother, anyway, smelling her ever-present aroma of garlic, face powder, and peppermint. "What happened to your finger?" asked Abuelita. "A big thorn," said Esperanza. Abuelita nodded and said thoughtfully, "No hay rosa sin espinas." There is no rose without thorns. Esperanza smiled, knowing that Abuelita wasn't talking about flowers at all, but that there was no life without difficulties. She watched the silver crochet needle dance back and forth in her grandmother's hand. When a strand of her hair fell into her lap, Abuelita picked it up and held it against the yarn and stitched it into the blanket. "Esperanza, in this way my love and good wishes will be in the blanket forever. Now watch. 10 stitches up to the top of the mountain. Add 1 stitch. 9 stitches down to the bottom of the valley. Skip 1. Esperanza picked up her own crochet needle and copied Abuelita's movements, and then looked at her own crocheting. The tops of her mountains were lopsided, and the bottoms of her valleys were all bunched up. Abuelita smiled, reached over, and pulled the yarn, unraveling all of Esperanza's rows. "Do not be afraid to start over," she said. Esperanza sighed and began again with 10 stitches. Softly humming, Hortensia, the housekeeper, came in with a plate of small sandwiches. She offered one to Mama. "No, thank you," said Mama. Hortensia set the tray down and brought a shawl and wrapped it protectively around Mama's shoulders. Esperanza couldn't remember a time when Hortensia had taken care of them. When Hortensia had not taken care of them. She was a Zapotec Indian from Oaxaca with a short, solid figure and blue-black hair in a braid down her back. Esperanza watched the 2 women look out into the dark and couldn't help but think that Hortensia was almost the opposite of Mama. "Don't worry so much," said Hortensia. "Alfonso and Miguel will find him." Alfonso, Hortensia's husband, was el jefe, the boss of all the field workers, and Papa's compañero, his close friend and companion. He had the same dark skin and small stature as Hortensia, and Esperanza thought his round eyes, long eyelids, and droopy mustache made him look like a forlorn puppy. He was anything but sad, though. He loved the land, as Papa did, and it had been the 2 of them, working side by side, who had resurrected the neglected rose garden that had been in the family for generations. Alfonso's brother worked in the United States, so Alfonso always talked about going there someday. But he stayed in Mexico because of his attachment to Papa and El Rancho de las Rosas. Miguel was Alfonso and Hortensia's son, and he and Esperanza had played together since they were babies. At 16, he was already taller than both of his parents. He had their dark skin and Alfonso's big, sleepy eyes and thick eyebrows that Esperanza always thought would grow into one. It was true that he knew the farthest reaches of the ranch better than anyone. Since Miguel was a young boy, Papa had taken him to parts of the property that even Esperanza and Mama had never seen. When she was younger, Esperanza used to complain, "Why does he always get to go and not me?" Papa would say, "Because he knows how to fix things, and he is learning his job." Miguel would look at her, and before riding off with Papa, he would give her a taunting smile. But what Papa said was true. Miguel had patience and a quiet strength and could figure out how to fix anything, plows and tractors, especially anything with a motor. Several years ago, when Esperanza was still a young girl, Mama and Papa had been discussing boys from good families whom Esperanza should meet someday. She couldn't imagine being matched with someone she had never met, so she announced, "I am going to marry Miguel." Mama had laughed at her and said, "You will feel differently as you get older." "No, I won't," Esperanza had said stubbornly. And I'm going to stop there. I'm at the top of page 18. There's no squiggly line. So she's still waiting. Her father has not returned from his work. They're not really sure where exactly he went, but it was, a job that he does all the time, checking on his cattle, and he still hasn't returned. While Esperanza's waiting, we're learning a little bit more about her. We learned about her grandmother, who looks a lot like her mom, and herself, because they all kind of are different ages, but they have a lot of similar physical features. We have also learned about Hortensia and her husband and their son, Miguel. They work on the ranch. They're very, very close to Esperanza and her family. Almost like family, but not like family. They work for them. And in those days in Mexico, there was a fine line. So there were the workers and the owners, and they may get close to each other. They may care about each other, but they always have a line that separates them. Their status was very important in those days. Now in 2020, all over the world, maybe we don't see the line of separation quite as much, but it's definitely there. There is definitely a line of status that separates people all around the world. And it usually has to do with economic status, how much money you have. So, or it could be something even more obvious. The way somebody looks, their appearance, the way they dress. And finally, Esperanza was saying that she had wanted to marry Miguel when she was little. She thought, okay, well, if I'm going to be told to marry someone, or if I have to marry someone, why can't it be Miguel? She knew him, she was close to him, but her mother laughed and said, "Oh no, when you're older, you won't feel the same way." And so now we're not really quite sure how Esperanza feels now that she is older. Not old enough to marry, but almost. 100 years ago, if you were the only child, the only daughter, she does not have any brothers to take over the ranch, then maybe she might even be expected to marry earlier. All right, we will stop there and continue reading on our next time. That's it. Bye.